Tell us how you approach things when you go into prison, because I think it's a good metaphor for all of us, that maybe not acknowledging that we've got our own mental prisons at times.
I don't go in anymore. I went for 30 years. I went to maximum security prisons. That when the lawsuit happened, it was one of the sadder things I said in the book, that they said you can't come in while that's going on. So that broke. So it was just one of the tragedies of that stuff. But the net result is I was going into maximum security prisons. Most of the guys will never get out, right? Florida State Prison and Union Correctional up here. And my attitude ever since I started teaching, because I don't think of myself as a teacher, I'm just sharing my experience, is I don't change what I have to say anytime, no matter who my audience is. So when I walk in that prison and I sit down with the inmates, with my boys, my men, right? I say exactly what I say sitting in the temple or when I say talking to you, right? And what is amazing is no matter who they are and where they came from, they get it. Exactly the same, right? And to this day, I say I don't go in, they still write me. I get lots of letters from the inmates. We send our books in for free. We do the thing. But they stayed free. In fact, there was a neat experience I had just before the whole thing happened. I couldn't go in anymore. They decided to separate the men in prisons, where the older ones would go to a prison. They broke the prison system up a different way. And so these men that had gone together were meditating together and had support groups together, got torn apart. And literally at 3 a.m, they would come in. They didn't want to tell them, they didn't want trouble. They would take them, they couldn't take their books, couldn't do anything. It's not nice to think about, right? And they took it, one of the men, all right, the black man, probably in his 30s, 40s, but he was very sincere. Right, and he was trying to meditate and so on, and he used to say to me when I go into prison, he'd look at me and say, "I'm still watching." He would, melt my heart. I'm still watching. Okay,
that's beautiful.
And so he got torn away and thrown down to some prison, somewhere in Florida, and he wrote us, and it touched me so deeply. He said, "This was one of the worst experiences I've ever gone through, and thanks to your teachings, I have gone through it instead of letting it destroy me, and I'm still watching."
That's beautiful.
I watched it all.
Witness it.
But I was going to say in something you said, and I want to make that point, because we've talked about surrender, but you need to take the course to understand what surrender means, all right?
It's not what people think it is.
It's a difficult thing, right? When you were talking about being honest and saying I was in a bad space, right? Isn't it true with both of you that there's a party that doesn't want to do that?
Oh, of course.
Now, I want to talk about that.
Until you make it a habit.
But I want to talk about that. Because
Yes.
that's what surrender means.
Yes.
Surrender means the willingness to surrender that part of your being.
Amen.
So that something
that's God.
higher can happen.
Yes.
Right? But that's ego. It's
The
just
ego.
pure ego.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
I want to blame it on him.
Oh, yeah,
I don't want to admit I
absolutely.
was wrong. Right? Man, the breaking of that habit.
It's one of the most important things for a relationship. If you don't have that
for
relationship,
every
it's pretty
business
hard.
too.
Yeah, it's true. It's true because business
I
is a
remember
relationship.
in my business, and I shouldn't use the name, but I will, where EDS, remember EDS,
Yes.
Perot's company, right?
Yes.
They wanted to have something to do with our business. So they flew their senior VPs, presidents of division, everything of healthcare out to my place, and they flew me over there to Plano, wherever the heck they are.
Yeah.
And I remember that we were sitting on the plane, right? And he was talking to me, and this particular person sat there and told me that they were trying to change the culture in this company to where they literally were training their executives to say I was wrong. And he didn't like it, right? He said, come on, these are power people, right? But they literally had caught on, the higher level of that company had caught on that if you're not willing to say you were wrong, right, you can't be right.
Absolutely.
Because you can't work with anybody. Isn't that beautiful?
Plus, you can
It's
never
so
make
beautiful.
a mistake.
You
You
can-
can never
but-
do anything
but isn't
worthwhile,
that how
right?
the ego
That's
is?
gorgeous.
Yes.
Yeah, it is so true.
Right?
It is
So that's
true.
what you're doing. We all need to do, even in business. Right?
Absolutely.
Just that, don't worry about what you look like. That's ridiculous. Worry about how you're helping the situation outside. It's not about you. It's about your contribution to the overall whole. That's what business is, right? If you make it be about you, it's dead because you're not doing so well.
You got to add more value than anybody else in the marketplace. To do that, you have to be clear.
That's right.
You got to let the energy come through you, and you can't have all this muck getting in the way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what I call the zone.
That's right.
When the muck is not there, oh my God.
Yeah.
Everything flows.
Right. I was watching the football game the other day, and I was so impressed. They were sitting there talking about some of the rookies. I think it was some of the quarterbacks were talking. Rogers, right? They're talking about how some of the rookies aren't ready yet because they're still thinking. Wow, is that deep?
So true.
Aaron, right? They're
So
still
true.
thinking, and you can't do it right while you're thinking.
That's right.
It has to be
You have to be in
zone.
the flow state.
Yes.
Yeah.
But isn't that beautiful?
It is
Isn't that
Which
what we're talking
requires,
about?
Yes.
and that trigger is maybe doing something enough, I can handle it, whatever the case may be, till you let go, and the flow just happens.
Well, that's exactly it. Every time you let go, you are open. They are like blinds. You have blinds closed that are not letting the light in. All right, it's not
The light
about
of joy,
finding.
the light of
It's
love,
not
the
about
light of-
finding more light, energy. Right? It's not about finding more light or setting up artificial light. It's about opening the blinds. And this, what we're talking about, and obviously I'm very impressed. You guys got it, and that's why you're so successful. All right, and that's why your relationship is so successful. It's beautiful that you will love each other at that level for such a length of time, right? And everyone should learn from that. And what it is about the willingness to open the blinds.
It is.
If you open the blinds, the
And
energy.
it's your blinds. Most people won't open
Yes.
somebody else's
That's right,
blinds.
that's exactly
Right?
right.
If I could just you to open the blinds and see this, that's what most of us do, and I've certainly been guilty of that in the past. But when you open your own blinds, then everything is
But the
clear.
energy comes in. You're a
Well,
being
you
of
can't have
high
energy
energy.
without it.
You know if you close inside, that energy doesn't come.
No way.
Right? And so the willingness to take that risk of letting go of the part of you that's limiting yourself, which is the ego,
Yeah.
self-concept, and all this stuff, right? And you just
Which is
let
just
it
another
go.
word for ego, is just fear. So a lot of people, they make the ego like it's this thing they got to fight. It's just fear. That's really what it is. It's the fear you're not enough. It's the fear you won't be loved. It's those unconscious fears. And if you relax and let go, you find out the fear is unfounded. It's like, how many things in your life have you been fearful about or frustrated or worried about, and they never came to be? And you spend all that time being stressed. I love that old quote that says, that a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a courageous man only once, or a woman only once, right? It's just like, let's just deal with it as it comes up as opposed to what we do in our mind. Because so much of our pain and our stress in our lives is just made up by the mind. And getting out of that back into the heart, the spirit, and the soul is what it's all about.
And it ends he should, she should. These ridiculous unconscious expectations of another and unconscious blame or unconscious judgments. And when you have that full responsibility and you claim that for yourself, it's like, oh, you turn it around. I should. All this advice that we're giving to whomever in our life, it's like if you're actually willing to turn that around and take responsibility for that and then offer that, it neutralizes it. It completely unravels these internal knots that we have, and the insane expectation that somebody is supposed to behave or do something different or speak differently, or that's just craziness. And yet when you're in it, you don't see it. But when you actually have that understanding, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And that's just such freedom. It's just such freedom.
It's trading the expectations for appreciation. It's like that's when suffering stops. It's that all the expectations are not going to be met. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It's going to be people are going to be in a different state, a different situation. They're going to have different goals. They might have a better way to do it. You just doesn't match your picture. But what I found is when I start to expect, like just let go of the expectation and find things to appreciate. There's always things to appreciate. Suffering's gone. The joy recovers immediately. It's not like something you're going to get someday when it's there. I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier, but I love it if you just play it a little deeper. And I know we're going to wrap up our conversation soon. But why do you say one of the most